The national debt.
The national debt.
The national debt.
U.S. government debt is now the highest in history.
We're gonna be broke.
Nothing has collapsed. Stock indexes sit near record highs. Governments are still paying their bills, so why is the finance ministry quietly preparing for something they refuse to name? This is not 2008. There is no panic, no bank runs, no screaming headlines. And that's exactly the danger. What's building now is slow, invisible, and systemic. It doesn't explode, it tightens. Global public debt has passed $100 trillion, the highest level in history, but the real threat isn't the debt itself, it's the cost of carrying it. This is the point where policymakers stop talking about debt levels and start worrying about interest arithmetic, because arithmetic doesn't negotiate. Interest rates jumped from near zero to multi-decade highs, forcing governments to refinance trillions at far higher rates. In the US, interest payments now rival and soon exceed defense spending. That's why governments aren't afraid of default, they're afraid of losing control. When interest grows faster than the economy, policy choices disappear, budgets lock in, bond markets start calling the shots. This crisis won't arrive like a storm, it arrives like gravity. Slow, constant, and unavoidable, and the fear rising now comes down from one change that broke the system. Do you think governments can still escape the debt trap, or is it already too late? Tell us your opinion in the comments below, and before we continue, hit that like button, subscribe and share, because what comes next explains why stopping this may already be impossible. For nearly 15 years, the global economy lived in an illusion. Interest rates were close to zero, money felt free, and borrowing came without consequences. Risk didn't disappear, it was simply hidden.
Cheap money turned debt into something that looked harmless, even responsible. After the 2008 financial crisis, governments borrowed aggressively to stabilize their economies. Then came COVID-19, and borrowing went into overdrive. Trillions were injected to keep businesses alive, pay workers, and prevent collapse. At the time, it made sense. Rates were near zero and servicing debt was easy. But that era is over. Interest rates are now at their highest levels in decades. And governments face a brutal reality. Old debt must be refinanced at far higher costs. Globally, trillions of dollars in bonds are rolling over in the next few years, but at double or triple the interest rates of the past. Take the US. Interest payments now consume around 17% of total federal spending, more than healthcare for veterans and closing in on defense. And this share keeps rising, even without new spending programs.
Here is the key point. Debt didn't suddenly explode. The cost of carrying it did. And that reveals a truth policymakers hope to avoid. Debt is only sustainable when money is cheap. Here's where debt turns dangerous. Governments are no longer borrowing to invest or stimulate growth. They are borrowing just to pay interest. That's the moment debt stops working for you and starts working against you.
Between now and 2027, about 42% of global public debt must be refinanced. That means trillions of dollars will roll over at today's much higher interest rates. 2026 is the warning year, when the pressure becomes impossible to ignore and budgets start bending under the weight. This isn't a developing world problem anymore. 6 of the 7 G7 economies are moving toward a debt trap, where new borrowing is used to service old borrowing. Growth slows, interest costs rise, and the cycle feeds on itself. The math is ruthless. Once interest rates grow faster than GDP, escape becomes brutally hard. Even cutting spending or raising taxes barely helps, because higher interest costs erase the gains. Every percentage point increase in rates pushes the finish line further away. At this stage, debt is no longer a policy choice. It's a constraint. Governments lose flexibility, options shrink, and mistakes become expensive.
This is when debt stops being a policy tool and becomes a survival problem. High debt doesn't just pressure budgets. It limits central banks' freedom. Raising interest rates fights inflation, but it also detonates governments' interest bills. For highly indebted states, every 1 percentage point rate hike adds hundreds of billions in long-term debt costs.
In the US, federal interest expenses have surged past $900 billion per year, more than double their level just 4 years ago. In several advanced economies, interest payments already exceed 2–3% of GDP, a level historically linked to fiscal stress. This is where fiscal dominance emerges. monetary policy becomes constrained by government solvency. That's why governments quietly tolerate alternatives. Inflation reduces the real value of debt. Currency depreciation boosts nominal revenues. Financial repression keeps interest rates below inflation, transferring wealth from savers to the state. Between 1945 and 1975, this strategy erased over 50% of public debt in many advanced economies without default. There's no dramatic collapse, just a slow erosion of purchasing power. Debt shrinks quietly, while households pay the price.
That's the reality policymakers won't say out loud. Inflation isn't a failure, it's an escape hatch. That always gets paid first. Before hospitals, before schools, before infrastructure, debt services comes at the top of the list. And that priority has consequences most people never see.
Globally, 3.3 billion people live in countries that now spend more on interest payments than on health or education. That means fewer doctors, overcrowded classrooms, and roads that never get built. Infrastructure projects are delayed, not because governments don't want growth, but because interest bills consume the cash before investment even begins. This trap has long defined developing economies, but the line separating rich and poor countries is blurring. Advanced economies are drifting closer to the same reality as rising interest costs squeeze public budgets year after year. What once funded innovation and productivity now goes to bondholders. There's no default headline, no dramatic collapse, just slow erosion, weaker services, aging infrastructure, and lost opportunity.
That's the real cost of debt pressure. Countries aren't defaulting on debt, they are defaulting on the future. Sovereign debt isn't isolated, it's a global web. When one government struggles, the ripple is immediate. Investors lose confidence, bond prices fall, and yields rise, making borrowing more expensive overnight.
Even a small economy can trigger panic. In 2022, when a single emerging market faced refinancing issues, bond yields in neighboring economies spiked by 1 to 2 percentage points, adding billions in interest costs without a single default. Countries heavily dependent on foreign investors are most exposed. Over 50% of debt in some developing nations is held internationally, meaning capital flight can happen in days. The danger isn't collapse, it's market panic. Prices adjust faster than governments can respond, tightening the squeeze on fiscal balance. One misstep, and the pressure spreads like wildfire, forcing policymakers to react before they're ready.
In short, debt crises spread faster than recessions, and in today's interconnected world, one country's wobble can shake the entire system. The solution to runaway debt is simple: grow GDP faster than debt, or run painful primary surpluses. In theory, governments know what to do. In practice, it's politically toxic. Raising taxes risks elections, cutting spending triggers public backlash, and unpopular decisions get postponed. This delay is costly. Every year, governments wait, debt compounds, interest payments climb, and the adjustment needed becomes harsher. In the US, for example, interest on the federal debt now exceeds $900 billion annually, more than spending on education. Globally, countries owe over $92 trillion, and many are spending more on debt than essential services. The truth is stark: debt crises don't end when governments act, they end when they are forced. So, what do you think? Can policymakers escape this trap? Or are we heading for a slow-motion reckoning? Let me know your opinion in the comments. And don't forget to hit like, subscribe and share this video so you don't miss our upcoming content. The next one's already brewing. Stay tuned.